this is AnnRenee
and Gwen Girl.
Welcome to Aha Podcast, and we're talking movies.
Yay!
Yay! So we're discussing the film One Night in Miami that was directed by Regina King, and the screenplay is by Kemp Powers. And One Night in Miami is a fictional account of one incredible night where icons Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown gather to discuss their roles in the civil rights movement and the cultural upheaval of the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to begin, Gwen Girl and I, with just giving our general overview feelings, if you will, of the film. And I loved it. I've watched it 3 times now, but that was, of course, in preparation for the podcast. But on my first viewing, when it ended, I said, loved it.
Yeah.
The production was great. I thought the story was magnificent, and the 4 main characters were all outstanding.
Yes.
Each time I was impressed with one actor's performance, I'd be like, oh, but he's good too. So
Yeah.
privy to be a part of the intimate conversation, even if it were fictionalized,
Right.
but really very relevant. And I was overall very pleased and would highly recommend One Night in Miami. Gwen Girl?
Absolutely. I concur with AnnRenee. Shout out to Regina King. Yeah, and I think, was this her directorial debut?
Of a feature film.
Yeah. So, we've seen her on those Cadillac commercials, but she driving. In fact, she's on the side note on the cover of I think it's In Style magazine for badass women, and she is a badass right now. But just fantastic job. I love the movie, and it started off saying that it was based on some true events, and so though it was a fictionalized account of all of these things in terms of a mashup in one night, it was just entertaining, enlightening. It was just great from start to finish. It was so impressively written that I actually went back to Google some of those things to see, what was true or not, because I was that drawn into the movement, if you will, of the script. And as AnnRenee said, all 4 characters were impressive in their own right. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, oh my God, this is one to definitely tune into. And if you have seen it, we certainly want you to respond to what we're going to put out there about it. So without further ado.
Yeah. And some of the, of course, while you're watching it, or your immediately impression after, is just how much of the issues and the dialogue, the conversations were relevant in the 1960s and are still so relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it.
Right.
So I'll just begin a little bit with just the opening, which kind of puts us in the place where the fellas, I'll call them fellas, are at that time, right before they all gather in Miami. And so we have Cassius Clay at this moment in time. He is not yet Muhammad Ali. He is in the ring fighting in London against a Henry Cooper, and he's doing his dance. He's so pretty, which almost costs him the fight, but he winds up winning on a technicality. And we have Sam Cooke, who is making his debut at the Copacabana, and it is, to say a very, not a very impressive debut, is to be very nice. Yeah, so he's trying to change his style. King of Soul wants to bring down the soul and, pump up the, whiteness. But The band is not allowed to sit in the bandstand. So it's just all gone wrong. And so he's in the dressing room, even laughing about how terrible that debut was. And we have Malcolm X and his wife talking because he seriously is at the point of separating from the Nation of Islam at this moment of time. And then we have Jim Brown making a visit to a former high school, I think it's high school coach, and has what is a very cordial visit on the enclosed porch of this beautiful old home. And then he offers his help to break up a bureau, and the coach says, "Oh no, we don't let niggers in the house." So that's about where everyone is in their place in time.
Right.
Okay, so I didn't know if you wanted to jump in and say anything about that.
Well, it just it set the premise for the movie. All of these men are at not the promised end of their careers, if you would. It's they're each trying to do something or making headway in their careers, but the barriers are already being made known at in the movie right here, and that kind of just sets the stage for how the rest of the night is going to unfold.
Right. And I won't try to remember all I'm in Miami now, and I won't try to remember all the names of the hotel, though I do remember Fountain Blue. So I think that's where Sam Cooke and his wife were staying, in the fancy Fountain Blue. And Malcolm X was in another hotel. And,
the Hampton, if I'm
the
not
Hamptons, okay.
Yeah.
And Cassius Clay was in another hotel.
That one I don't remember. Yeah.
And so these were the hotels where Cassius and Malcolm X were staying were predominantly black, if not all black. I guess we could say
I think they were all,
at this point in time. They were all black, not predominantly black. But the Fountain Blue was integrated in such a way that Sam Cooke couldn't book his own reservation or make his own reservation or even walk into the lobby and claim his room, that he had to have his Caucasian manager or business manager or partner or whatever he was come into the hotel to do that. And my reason for bringing that up, because one of the earliest issues with that was, how is success manifested for these guys? Because they've all been prominent. I guess with Cassius Clay, he is reaching his prominence. He's on the climb to being he will soon be the heavyweight champion of the world. I don't think I gave that anything away. Sam Cooke is already a very successful recording artist, label owner. Jim Brown is one of the best NFL players playing, and Malcolm X has certainly garnered his share and amount of attention. So they're all doing their thing, but Sam Cooke staying at the Fountain Blue is his way of sort of saying, here's what I've been able to accomplish. Although his wife, Barbara, at the time is saying, we really should be at the other hotels, one of the other hotels where either Malcolm or Cassius are staying, because we'd really be having more fun there.
Yeah, anyway. She preferred the company of her contemporaries, if you would. Mm-hmm. She wasn't as excited about being able to be in a place that signified success through white world. She was, it seemed more comfortable with being, as she said, with Malcolm and them at the Hampton House.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to ease on into what we frame Black segregation.
Mm-hmm.
Gwen Girl, you want to kick some things around with that?
Yeah. So it was interesting, and I'll just start with Sam Cooke and the beautiful room that they had at the Fountain Blue, and his wife. He was really excited about where they were and what it symbolized for him, and his wife made that comment that, she'd rather be, with Malcolm and the other blacks at the Hampton House. And, he seemed, a bit disappointed by that. And, she said, she told him that, it was a nice room, but for her, it was, maybe she seemed like a fish out of water in that arena.
Mm-hmm.
Sam was more intentional about how he was moving his career, based on what we were seeing. He was more intentional about, things that were symbolic. Even though he bombed at the Copa, when he opened that set, one of the things he said was that they were witnessing, his dream come true of being able to play there. So, he seemed to be methodical about how he visioned his life, being, and what would, be a measure of that success. So, here where they were also able to stay at this place that, it was an established place. And even though he wasn't able to check himself in, he needed somebody white to do that. He was still able to stay there. And so he was, kind of knocking down things. And so his wife, and I don't know if her perspective was just from the fact of, well, this is what you do. You're singing, you have a gift that's crossing over, and, all of those kinds of things. But, for her, the connection was her blackness, so I'd rather be by my people. We can, you can sing over there, but if we're going to hang, I want to hang with my people. So it was interesting because I kind of thought about what the price you pay for opening doors for others, and so the discomfort of his wife, the not being able to, just walk up and check yourself in. You have the money, you have, the name, the fame that will allow this to be, it's okay, but just, you just still can't be upfront about it. Somebody has to pay the price for those things to happen. So, we're going to find a little later on when this is a thing he's being teased about this by Malcolm. But, my thought about that, looking at, listening to Sam and watching the interchange with his wife, is that somebody's got to pay the price. And this is what it looks like. And if I, side by side, put the Malcolm piece, he would not have been allowed because he had the same amount of fame. It was a negative notoriety, if you would. They certainly would not, I believe, have allowed him there. And he was also paying a price for his, being the one who has to make room for others, and so he was, even though he was among his people, there was still security at the Hampton House, where all the blacks were. There was still security he needed to feel secure. And supposedly this was, I guess, to stop any whites from coming in, or whatever, if you will, the white devils, as he was known for saying, from coming in and presenting any attack. But still, this was the price he had to pay. So that segregation, even among blacks, I've got to look around at everything that's going on, white side and the black side, trying to be a certain way, that heavy lifting. And so the segregation it brought, because I'm sure at that time that was uncomfortable speech that he was saying, even though some, blacks may have agreed with the fight, his languaging was a bit strong. It may have been a bit scary, for them at that time. And so then that caused blacks to stray away from him too. But again, based on the mantle he believed he had to be the one. So it caused segregation there, among blacks, like, oh, he could say it a better way, or, that's not Christian. I mean, I've heard a lot of things in doing the research. I've read, the take on it, because all blacks were not ride or die, with Malcolm also. So those two things stood out to me, how they both had to deal with black on black segregation and segregation in general.
Okay, good. That was a whole lot of stuff. Good stuff. And kind of made me lose my train of thought a little bit, because I was going to head into something Gwen Girl did say about Sam Cooke's approach, and about it was sort of he certainly had an idea of what he wanted to accomplish further. if it were knocking down barriers, if it, just a way in which a black man could move within this country. He had an idea. He was methodical in his approach, as Gwen Girl said. But what is interesting about that is further illuminated in the conversations among the four men. Each of them had a plan, a methodical plan. No one was necessarily flying by the seat of his pants.
Mm-hmm.
They all had an idea of where they were going, and they had varying approaches on how to get there. So a lot of the discussion heated oftentimes in the conversations among them were just about that, about their individual agendas, their individual plans, purpose, dreams, and then how that is part of, or was it a part of the overall agenda, plan, purpose for Black Americans in this country in the 1960s? Did you count your agenda among the people? Are you part of the people's plan or the people's movement? That was particularly the case between Sam Cooke and Malcolm X. Again, where there was some seriously heated dialogue. And there were oftentimes, as I was listening, as the four are gathered in the hotel room, and we get a little bit of glimpse of their personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Sam comes in looking for a party. Cassius is high off his wind, jumping around like a kid who just has, as he said, all this extra energy. Jim is looking for a woman. And Malcolm is talking struggle in his people. He's still in a speech mode, it appears. So
yeah, he thought they'd spend an evening of reflection.
Yeah, reflection. And they're like, dude, we came to party.
Yeah.
Having
we
a party. So,
right.
So
we want to celebrate. Yeah, and he wants to reiterate.
So it already is that they come in the room. They all gather in the room with all of these expectations of what the night is going to look like. And Malcolm offers them ice cream and vanilla at that. So, so you, as you can imagine, there's a little bit of a coming down, a crashing from that setup. But the conversation gets heavy quickly.
Yes.
And something about Malcolm. I guess I want to start with Malcolm because he was so prominent. In at first viewing, I thought he is truly targeting Sam. Like most of his pointed comments were at Sam and against Sam's approach to segregation versus non-segregation versus what are you doing for the movement? The struggle is real. What are you doing for the struggle? So it was an attack of him personally. It was an attack of his business approaches. It was an attack of his artistry, the kinds of music he was saying, and it really was an attack because Malcolm wasn't softening his blows. So, but it brought about rich conversation
absolutely
between the two of them, and then among all four of them, right? So one of the things, though, when it wraps up, and I'm going to skip to the end, only in that a lot of that, there was one moment I remember saying, man, that was some projection Malcolm was doing. He was projecting a lot onto Sam, and a lot of that, of course, had to do with his feelings at the time and about his own safety. I want to go back to what Gwen Girl said about, even though he was at the all Black hotel, he still needed the quote unquote security of his brothers from the nation. So I really felt, and this is when the actor just did such an exceptional job of relaying what Malcolm thought was impending doom. So he'd seen these guys, a couple of white guys outside of his hotel room. and he'd seen them before, following him in an airport. So he was having issue with the Nation of Islam. There was tension there, long going tension, and he had been silenced by Elijah Muhammad after the comments he made after John F. Kennedy's assassination. So Malcolm was having a lot. He was dealing with a lot. He had a lot on his shoulders, just personal, because as his wife said in the beginning, everything, where they lived, what they drove, everything was provided to them by the nation. So if he's separated or severed his ties with the nation, how in the world would we live? How would they live? So a lot, I think, of his intensity in that hotel room that was particularly pointed at Sam had to do with his own presence of mind and feelings and needs for himself, for his family, and for his people. So he was at a rush. There was a line, he even said that it's time to draw a line in the sand. Either you are with us or you are against us. Either you're with the movement or you're against the movement. And a lot of that had to do with what I thought was some real pointed conversations with Sam Cooke. At one point, even Jim Brown said, "Oh, wow, the knives have really come out now. And if I get cut, somebody's going to get a butt whipping in here." But it had to do with the richness that also made for the richness of the conversation among the men. Gwen, you want to jump into anything?
Yeah, that was a whole lot too.
I was a whole lot.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out where I could most effectively do a double dutch. And so in everything that AnnRenee has laid out, it brought us to several issues that kept floating to the surface. So breaking down barriers. Sam wanted to gain entrance in and exposure to whites, while Malcolm wanted to reject, trying to integrate with whites. Another issue was in getting into these spaces, how you authentic, or are you just, pandering, and in all of this, like, to speak to the urgency of the moment, there was a scene where when Malcolm was talking about there was a certain feeling in the air, I don't think he said doom, but he said menace. Menace was what it was. And so then in his relaying that moment, you got a chance to kind of know that he was maybe getting a glimpse of his impending death, and that urgency to the others was about, purpose and seizing the moment, not wasting your gifts. He talked to each one of them about what he saw in them. He said that Cassius was fists and a voice, and he said that Jim Brown he showed fearlessness. But the thing that was noticed about Sam Cooke was that what he displayed was power. And so I think that's, and he wasn't the one who actually called it power first. There was a conversation that Jim Brown had with Sam Cooke. But anyway, it was the power. It's just, Sam Cooke.
Cassius and Sam, I think.
Okay, yeah. So Sam was the one that represented, I guess, maybe the greatest possibility. His ability to bring Blacks together, and his ability to also be regarded, by whites. So this was kind of what was, again, AnnRenee had a reference that they all had a sense of purpose about what, how they planned on using their particular gifts, if you would, in advancing what they thought they wanted to do, with their lives, and even considering how it would, help, the people, if you would. And so again, in the hotel room, everything was, these issues were the thing that we got a chance to see. We got a chance to hear the discussion, and I was most impressed with Sam Cooke's character, because his ability to not just want a piece of the pie. In fact, he said at one point in the movie, he said, I don't want a piece of the pie. He said, I want the goddamn recipe, and I was like, wow, and this was one of the facts I had to go back and look up. And he did, in fact, own his own masters. He invested in other groups. He had his own label, all of that. And so he was securing economic growth and wealth. And that, with the rich conversation they were all having, it seemed like he had the best idea, for furthering the cause. If we can affect this thing economically, then we'll be listened to. So that was just, for me, the go ahead.
I just wanted to say about that whole argument, that's still an argument, because, and this is what makes it a argument, because while Sam Cooke was in fact talking about economic prosperity, economic development, all that it equals economic freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and Jim Brown also brought home that point to Malcolm in a conversation the two of them had privately. The argument is that, can you do that aside or absent any kind of true involvement with heart involvement, mm-hmm. mind involvement? Mm-hmm. Is it enough to say, look at what I do and earn and how I can go back and recycle money into the community, if that's in fact what you're doing? Or mm-hmm. or should you also be in the community, your presence, your mm-hmm. heart? Mm-hmm. So Sam Cooke shared a story about economic empowerment in terms of, like Gwen Girl said, owning his own masters and heading a label, but also about a fellow musician who realized when the Rolling Stones covered one of his songs, how much money he made, as opposed to his singing the song, and how he had tepid presence on the Billboard. But when the Rolling Stones covered it, it made it to number one. And as the writer of the song, he made a lot of money. Yeah, and so
he said every time a white girl bought one of those records, money went into his pocket.
Right. So the argument the counter that Malcolm X offered was that that's great, but is that enough? And I'm broaching that because that's still an argument, a discussion. What is the right balance, or mm-hmm. is there a balance? Because while I was impressed with Sam Cooke's approach, I wasn't wholeheartedly invested in it. Mm-hmm. While I was impressed with Malcolm's intensity, I wasn't wholeheartedly invested in it. Mm-hmm. That's what made it such a rich conversation. I really was also, I don't want to leave the other two characters out, even though Cassius was very, very young. He too was starting to execute a plan. Mm-hmm. And he said he shared that in a story about a wrestler who is an attention grabber, and mm-hmm. Win or lose, the people are really coming in the arena to see this wrestler because he has such a big persona. And so that shed a little light on our Cassius Clay / Muhammad Ali. I'm so pretty, I'm the greatest of them all. Talking smack, as one might say, talking some other stuff, as somebody else might call it. But no matter what, you're showing up in that arena to see him box, because not only did he talk smack, he was in fact one of the greatest boxers that ever lived. He backed his smack. So he backed his smack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So, and I don't want to leave Jim Brown out, who seemed to be able to take in all of the arguments
Mm-hmm.
He, in fact, was a sounding board for all three of the men, and he too had his own plan. He was not, even though he was regarded as because he was such an excellent athlete, a football player, he for one moment was not at all delusional about where he stood in society as a black man. And I believe that's what the beginning of the film wanted to show when he went to visit the coach. You can be celebrated for what you can do and still be hated for who you are.
Yeah, and look, and just to interject right there, what Jim said in the movie, he said that we're all gladiators, and he says he didn't want a ruler, somebody that was going to give him a thumbs up or a thumbs down, on what he did, and so he would rather take charge of his own destiny.
Right, right, and that's what all of them were fighting for. If you think about it, they were all
ways.
fighting for. Sam was fighting for his own destiny. Malcolm wanted his own destiny. That's why he was he separated from the nation. Jim wanted his own destiny. That's why when he was given an ultimatum, play or go, or be fined or punished or whatever, he said, okay, to the NFL, peace, deuces, love you, gotta go. And Cassius was coming into his own destiny, both in the boxing ring and making his own decisions about his religious path. So they were all trying to have some control over their own destiny. So the discussion of, as we've talked about, was all about how you go about it. And I will say this: I didn't think anybody was absolutely right, and I didn't think anybody was absolutely wrong.
Right.
That's what made it so great. I think going back, it's a little bit of all of that. Even the conversation Gwen Girl referenced when Cassius and Sam Cooke step out to get some spirits, and and Cassius reminds, I'm looking for my notes because I want to remember what he said about the four of them and where they were at this moment in time. They are young, black, righteous, famous, and unapologetic. And so that's power. So the question is, how do you use your power? How do you use your black power to get what you want? So it's personal to you. And then an extension of that is to how that manifests itself in the larger community. So so that's a long way of saying these were four insightful men.
Right.
Even though Malcolm asked for reflection, I think they had all been doing that.
Right.
And as an aside, I also like the way the way that Cassius Clay was depicted, because sometimes I think he can be mocked. He has been mocked in film as if he weren't a very intelligent man. And though he was not extremely educated, and I love that he would always, if there was a word that was tossed around, he'd say, I don't know what that means, but if it's good, that's me. So he never pretended to be what he wasn't. But he was a serious man and serious about his business of boxing and serious about his business of how he wanted to exercise his faith, to the point of even losing 3 years of boxing to do so, to fight in a war that he thought he had no business fighting. And so they were all men of character, and they were all serious, all very flawed men. I want to go back when we say character, people start talking about what you didn't do or did do. All human beings with flawed characters, but men of importance in an important time, discussing important issues in an important way. So yeah, that was that. Yeah. I came away with feeling really, again, good about the conversation. That also, one other point, depicted Black men as a very, very strong-minded, strong in body, strong in spirit, but also very open, very vulnerable. You saw a lot of weaknesses in that room. You saw a lot of vulnerability in that room. You saw a lot of hurt. in that room, so much so that a couple of times, either one, I'm thinking Sam had to walk out. Malcolm X was actually silenced by something Sam said. If we're going to go quickly back to what Gwen Girl said about the segregation, that while Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and the nation often talked about the white devils in the world, that they never addressed the black scoundrels, the ones who was cheating and lying in the black communities and doing it and victimizing blacks in that community. So they were silenced about some of their own sins and crimes. And so when that was brought forth to Malcolm, he was silenced. And as much as Malcolm was giving Sam the business about, calling him a monkey who was dancing for his monkey grinders, Sam astutely pointed out that when Elijah Muhammad said to shush, he shushed. Malcolm shushed.
Yeah.
Shushed. So
like a good Negro.
Like, hey, come on now.
Yeah, like a good Negro.
So if white folks are my grinder, then who's yours, Malcolm?
Yeah.
So it was it was a lot about, look at me, but look in the mirror also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll jump right in there. It's like, because everything, the way it's landing on me that AnnRenee is saying is talking about your perspective of how to move based on how you're defining your purpose. And there was a line that Sam said in there, he said that determining his creative and business destiny is as inspiring as pissing people off. And I laughed and I pondered it though, because all things in perspective, all things, are necessary. So you need someone to be outraged at, the injustices. And then you need somebody that can, kick a hole in the wall. And then you need somebody that once you get in the room, they can now stand in the room. And then you need somebody that can talk to the room, So I love that statement, because it really was just rich for me. And even in thinking about, what we're seeing, playing out in our own government, there are times when, it's just like, shit, we need a Malcolm right about now. Cause see this, and then, you're looking, it's like, well, no, you need a Martin, and then it's like, you need a this and you need a that. And then you realize that because we're so diverse as humanity, we need it all. We need it all, and so then, the growth is in not telling someone how to use their weapon according to what we would do if we had that weapon, because it's easy to be a sideline, armchair quarterback, because my perspective is the field, the entire field. And I'm just imagining I have all of this intimacy, you're just taking it for granted that, why this person is moving the way they're moving, and so then to actually be that person who has this gift, this is the thing I am built to do. I think it's important that we, lean in a little further and be less judgmental on how they did what they did, because you really don't know what they're considering, from my vantage point, sometimes admiring, gifts, you can say, oh, do this, oh, you should do this and you should do that, because you see it differently, and people often see more in us than we see in ourselves, and so then it's good to be able to listen without judgment and to speak without judgment, so that you can get the bigger thing, the bigger idea, because there may be, things to glean from somebody from the outside that you didn't even know. It's like it was landing like that. I often talk when AnnRenee and I are talking, and, I talk about the distinction of my intention versus how I occur. I'm pretty aware of what I intend, but, I found, time even in our discussions, personal discussions, like, wow, that wasn't my intention, but it's certainly how I occurred, so, I just loved when Sam said that, because it just kind of spoke to, people determine how they move according to what they believe their purpose is, and to just, I don't know, maybe sometimes we just kind of box people in, if I had that gift, I would, and it's like, that's why you don't have that gift. You have the one that you have. Are you as profound, as prolific in your gifting, and how you move with it as you are in telling other people what they're called to be and what they need to be? So it was, again, that's what I got out of all the different perspectives. And it was really rich looking at how they were all different and brought something different and equally as powerful, to the progression of Black people and people, just humanity. So that's my bit on that. I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add to that because I agree with it. And that was, if anything, it was a confirmed or an elevated aha moment. Is that we're all special.
Yeah,
we're all special, and we're certainly all unique, and that the recognition of that is great. And it's something you said. Now I'm remembering what it was when Jim Brown made a point of saying something about the uniqueness of them all. It's one of the central reasons for Jim Brown's presence was that, again, he was quite the sounding board. So in him, we got to hear conversations with Sam that Malcolm wasn't privileged to.
Yeah.
We got to hear conversations that he had with Cassius that Sam and Malcolm weren't privileged to. So in a way, through Jim, we got to see them all in the de-escalation of the moments, as well as the escalations of the moments. And only when somebody was it seems that physically might be a threat to Jim that he really kind of escalate. Other than that, he was probably the coolest throughout the entire film.
Absolutely.
But
again, Malcolm had highlighted his fearlessness. And I think when you have that level of fearlessness, you're pretty calm anyway, because that threshold has to be very, very, very high, or very, very, very vulnerable, if you would, to, get that kind of reaction out of him.
Yeah. So I don't think I have anything other than there was one quick thing that, again, Jim pointed out to Malcolm when he asked if Malcolm were so militant because he was such a light-skinned brother. And I thought that was very interesting because, of course, we've dealt in our Black community, we've dealt with that light skin versus darker skin Black thing. And so the question I wrote down as I watched that was, are we sometimes trying to prove our Blackness?
Yeah.
And so that was just an interesting point I had, because there is a line, if believe it or not, from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that I remember when Carlton was denied entry into a fraternity, and it was because he was this bougie black Negro who lived in Beverly Hills, and Carlton said, "Being Black is not what I'm trying to. No, Black is not what I'm trying to be. It's what I am." So when I thought about, made me think about that as I listened to Jim Brown ask Malcolm, are you trying, is part of you just trying a little bit too hard? My brother, to be my brother.
Your blood's not black enough.
Yeah. I'm black. I'm blacker than black. I'm blacker than black. So,
In fact, I'm 10 times as angry as you darker brothers. Yeah.
So anyway, that was a little.
So then, right. So I think it just brings us to the closing part. You want to talk about what was going on when the movie closed, and then kind of just give our aha about it?
Well, because I've given one, but in the room with Sam and Jim, after, I gotta say, I was feeling a little bit for Sam, but after he said, I have been working on this song. He shares with Jim that he has been working on a song. So once we've moved out of the hotel room, and and let's not forget, we also have the moment when Cassius Clay announces that he is in fact becoming a Muslim. He will be joining the Nation of Islam, and he has Malcolm standing next to him right outside of the hotel. And then we move away from that scene, and we see Sam Cooke on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and he sings one of his standards, and then he comes back and sings a song he said he's been working on, and of course he debuts "A Change Is Gonna Come." And I mean, that song is just so powerful.
Yeah.
And Leslie's interpretation of it, it made me, the first time I watched the movie, I just remember just being like just quiet and feeling something. That song can just bring tears to your eyes.
Yeah.
It is just such a powerful song, and it didn't lose any of its power in the interpretation, because Leslie Odom is in fact singing all of the Sam Cooke songs in the movie.
I did not know that. I really did, because I was so impressed with him.
No, it's totally Leslie singing all of
Leslie
singing all of Sam Cooke songs. So that's, having Gwen Girl say that, it's striking because the song itself, the lyrics are so powerful, and then his interpretation and delivery is equally as powerful.
Yeah, haunting, if you would. Yeah, so I didn't know that.
So as Sam is singing, we have a montage of clips, and we see Cassius Clay becomes Muhammad Ali at the Nation of Islam, and we see on stage is an empty chair where Malcolm X would have been seated, and now he is, he's in the full separation from the nation. And then we see Malcolm's house is bombed, and he runs out with his children and his wife, and the house is totally engulfed in flames, and a very big rifle, by the way. He has a very big rifle in his hand. But his house is engulfed in flames, and so he escapes with just his children and his wife and the clothes on their backs. And then we see Jim announces his retirement from the NFL so that he can pursue acting full time. And all of this is all shown as Sam is continuing to sing. And the very last moment, we see Malcolm sitting at the table in the hotel room with his wife looking sad. Is just not even the beginning of it. No. It's so much. Yeah. It's so much because the people you've spent your life with and your life work, you've had to separate from. And so you're wondering about that. You're wondering about your husband. You're wondering about the health and safety of your children. I mean, really, that young actress, and we haven't had an opportunity to talk about her, she showed all of that on her face. Yeah. In just a moment, you knew all of the anguish she was sharing, all the stress and she was bearing. So kudos to her. And then as I was saying, you see Malcolm sitting at the table, and on the table is the manuscript for the autobiographical of Malcolm X laying before him, because one of the things he had said earlier in the movie was that he realized the importance of telling his own story. So we can tie that into a whole lot of stuff we've already talked about, but the importance of telling your own story. Yeah, and so that was the last scene.
So your aha was with
my aha moment was earlier when I recognized that we all have a role. The specialness, the uniqueness of people, and I think you hit on this too, is that we like to say in New Orleans, especially, that that's the gumbo, and the gumbo needs all of the ingredients in the pot. Mm-hmm. And I was going to say something else, but I'll let you do that. I think you're going to. I think you're going to hit this, so I'm going to let you go ahead.
I hope not to disappoint. Well, for me, the aha was wondering how many one night in New Orleans kind of conversations that I've had. I like to think that my friends, anytime I'm with my friends, we are these people. We are representative of unique giftings and purpose and awareness. And, sometimes we're just hanging out, chewing the fat, drinks, having fun. And, a powerful conversation breaks out. And this is, we start talking about everything from, religion to relationships to, politics, just whatever. And we're always coming away enlightened by the others, and getting a glimpse of, wow, it's like, girl, yeah, what you gonna do with that, kind of thing. And so then for me, just reflecting on how many one nights have happened, and we've not moved it past that one night, and so then for me, it's made me more intentional about these powerful conversations when I'm in the midst of these not yet famous superstars, if you would. It's like, because I know when I'm in the presence of gifts and talents and abilities and purpose being played out. So, just being mindful. So my challenge is to, for everyone who has watched the movie and been inspired, check out your one night or, your one nights. And I challenge you to really just go a little deeper, be inspired by what you saw, but more inspired by what this has opened up in you.
I'm AnnRenee.
And this is Gwen Girl.
This is AHA Podcast. We thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.